Hello, folks. Welcome back to World War II TV. And don't mention the football. I'm still gutted about. Anyway, whatever. We have been really looking at the Rhineland campaign over the last few weeks. Been looking at those obstacles, the Ruhr, the Rhine, Saarbrücken, all that stuff there. And we are continuing our look at the 1945 battles as Stephen Clay returns to continue the story of his beloved 1st Division, with a bit of emphasis on the 16th Infantry. As the Big Red One closed in on the Rhine and later the city of Bonn, what was the fighting like? Well, we are about to find out. Don't forget to click like and subscribe. I'll bring Steve in now. Good afternoon, sir. How are you today?
As I always say, I'm better than I deserve.
Good. So, yeah, I've been asking every historian this as we've been covering this series. The Rhineland, the Rhine campaign, the Ruhr campaign, people just don't talk about it much. It's like after the Ardennes, everybody feels we're on this downward slope now to the end of the war and everything's done and dusted. The Germans are going to give up. But I'm assuming you'd agree with me. It's actually a fascinating period because the US Army, the British Army are finally getting to display the skills they've really been honing over those previous 2 years.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, clearly you see the weakness of the German forces starting to come to the fore, much more so than before the Battle of the Bulge. But they haven't given up yet, and that's one of the kind of amazing things is how complex and difficult some of the fighting is. Although, like I say, when they get to Bonn, that's going to be I'll save that for when I get there. But that in and of itself is an interesting operation because of the way it pans out. But it's really kind of unexpected for both the Germans and the 1st Division guys.
Well, I think that's it. That the key to me is everything is a bit unexpected. No one really knows what the German units are going to do in front of them. Are they going to fight to the last man? Are they going to just run away? Are they going to surrender in droves? Because all of those things are happening kind of concurrently up and down the broad front that Eisenhower has gone for. And we had Christopher Jarry on talking about the British 30 Corps, and that they just didn't know. Some villages, the Germans just kind of run away. Others, they are defending ditch by ditch, house by house. So that unknown quality makes it interesting from the military history point of view. But you've come on with your slides. We'll put them up on screen. So, folks, you know the score. You've seen Steve present before. So lots of maps, heavy on detail. But over to you, sir.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to present the viewers with kind of an outline of what I plan to talk about today. First off, I just want to kind of get everybody up to date with what the leadership changes were in the 1st Infantry Division when we get to really roughly December 1944, because those are the guys that are going to lead the division primarily. These same guys are going to lead it through the rest of the war. I'll talk a little bit, not very long, about the background to the operations from the Ruhr River to the Rhine, which is the focus of course, this presentation. I'll talk very little about the Battle of the Bulge, just kind of what happens, and then the movement to the Siegfried Line, and then finally the movement to the Ruhr River, which is where the meat of this will start. And then before I get started on that, I want to cover something that I've done before, and it's really I owe most of this to Greg Fontenot and his book No Sacrifice Too Great, because for those of your listeners that are familiar with that book, they know that Greg does a really good job at describing what the 1st Division does to prepare its men for the next operation. And they don't waste their time, that's for sure. And so I'll cover kind of the lessons learned and what they're doing to get ready for the next operation, because as you'll see, it's distinctly different than what they've run into on the European continent thus far. And then I'll talk through the plan for the crossing of the Ruhr River, which I've misspelled there, but that's okay. I'm pronouncing it right, I think. Then the actual crossing, what actually pans out as far as the crossing of the Ruhr, and then the movement to the Rhine, what happens in terms of the combat between there and Bonn, the plan for seizing the Rhine River Bridge at Bonn, and then finally the capture of Bonn, and then I'll summarize at the conclusion. So that's kind of what I'm going to cover for everybody today. All right, so leaders of the 1st Division. The last podcast I did, I talked about the 1st Infantry Division on Omaha Beach. At that time, General Hubner was the commander of the 1st Division. In December of 44, he moves over, or I should say up, to be the 5th Corps commander, which the division is for the most part, going to be working for him most of the rest of the war, but not entirely. But anyway, he moves up, and the division artillery commander, Cliff Andrus, takes over as the CG of the 1st Division. So he'll lead the division for the rest of the war. The guy who was the assistant division commander at Omaha, General Willard Wyman, he gets promoted and moves up to command the 71st Division. So the old 16th Infantry regimental commander, George Taylor, he's promoted to brigadier general, and initially he's sent over to the 4th Infantry Division temporarily to be the ADC there, and then comes back to the division in October 44, and he'll be the ADC for the rest of the war. Taking his place in the 16th Infantry is Colonel Frederick Gibb. So you'll hear me mention him a number of times during the presentation. And then leading the 18th Infantry is from about the 25th of February, about the time the Ruhr River operations start, will be Lieutenant Colonel John Williamson. He'll be taking the place of George Smith, who is promoted and moves up to be an ADC and will die very shortly thereafter. He's killed in action. But Williamson, 2nd Battalion Commander of the 18th, he'll lead the regiment for the rest of the war. And then John Seitz will, of the 26th Infantry, will lead that regiment for at least during the rest of this discussion. Okay, so that's who's leading the division at this point. And what I want to do right now is talk a little bit about the Battle of the Bulge. The bottom line is that the Battle of the Bulge for the 1st Division is not too sexy. I mean, you know, you have all kinds of moving parts hither and yon, but the 1st Division basically sets up in defensive positions between the town of Waymes and the town of Bulligan. They're just kind of south of the Elsenborn Ridge area, 99th Division, where those guys are at 2nd Infantry Division. And they go in defensive positions, and for the whole, well, at least the first half, at least until the offensive starts, they're sitting in defensive positions, conducting patrols, and trading shots fired with the 3rd Parachute or 3rd Fallschirmjäger Division of the German Army. And that's pretty much what they do until sometime around the middle of January, when they take their first offensive steps after the Battle of the Bulge. Now, about the 31st of December, roughly halfway through the Battle of the Bulge, Eisenhower issues a warning order to the Allied forces, and for the resumption of the offensive into Germany once the Bulge has been eliminated. And he's going to make Montgomery's 21st Army Group, of course, the main effort. And Montgomery's going to have the responsibility of seizing the Ruhr industrial complex area. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the next episode, because the 1st Division does play a bit of a role in that. But once the Bulge is reduced, then what will happen is the 21st Army Group in the north, the 12th Army Group under Bradley in the center, and then Devers has the 6th Army Group in the south, will advance, to the Rhine River, trying to destroy as much of the German army, between there and the Rhine, and then, of course, cross the Rhine, complete the destruction of the German forces. And one of the things that I stumbled on that I hadn't realized before was that part of the idea, it's logical, of course, but the Rhine being the barrier that it is would be a very good defense, or help with the defense anyway, of preventing another Bulge type operation by the German army. Very hard for them to repeat something like that. So at that point, it's just a matter of steamrolling forward and trying to finish off the German army, driving through Germany. Now the 1st Army's mission, that's where we're going in the center. With the 12th Army Group, is under the 5th Corps. I should say General Hodges, Tony Hodges, has both the 5th Corps and the 18th Airborne Corps at this point. And of course, the 18th Airborne Corps is under Matt Ridgway. And their mission, of course, is pretty simple. It's get to the Rhine River and try to destroy as many the German forces as they can. It's pretty straightforward. But the immediate mission, of course, is they'll attack essentially through or south of the Eifel, and then penetrate into Germany and penetrate the Siegfried Line once again. And as you recall, this will be the 2nd time the 1st Infantry Division gets to do that. They did the first time up at Aachen, and now they moved south, and since nobody's been down through that area yet, they get a chance to repeat their effort. Again, pretty straightforward. Now, on the 26th of January, the 1st Infantry Division is actually relieved from the 5th Corps and attached to Ridgway's 18th Airborne Corps for this next phase. And the 18th Airborne Corps at this point, the two units that we're most concerned with, of course, is the 1st Infantry Division and the 82nd Airborne Division. 82nd will advance on the right flank or the southern flank of the 1st Infantry Division. And they kick off their attack on the 29th of January, 1945. And they're still opposing their old opponents from the Battle of the Bulge, which is the 3rd Fallschirmjäger Division, but also the 89th Volksgrenadier Division. Those are the two main units that they run into as they fight for their way toward the German frontier again. Needless to say, the fighting is pretty difficult going. It's a lot of snow, very deep snow, and one of the bad things is that when guys would get wounded, they'd fall in that deep snow, and if they couldn't move or drag themselves away and nobody finds them, they just freeze to death, which was not an uncommon occurrence during this time frame. Bottom line, though, is that they advanced toward the German border, and Ridgway in his memoir writes something I thought was kind of interesting. He says, watching the 1st Infantry Division and the 82nd Airborne Division was like watching two great racehorses driving ahead and headed for the finish line, which is kind of interesting because that's not too different description of that they had of the 2nd Infantry Division in World War I, where you had one Army brigade and one U.S. Marine brigade, and they were called the Racehorse Brigades because they were always trying to outdo each other. We kind of see the same thing happening here with the 82nd Airborne Division. At any rate, by the 2nd of February, the 1st Division is in Germany and has pierced the Siegfried Line right in the vicinity of Hollerath, as you can see there in the lower part of the slide where it says 2 February. You see a little town just south there. It says Hollerath. That's where they penetrate. Now, 2 days later is when the following day is when the 9th Army in Bradley's 12th Army Group is then transferred to Montgomery's 21st Army Group, and he becomes the main effort. And not only does he get the 9th Army, he also gets 5 divisions from the 1st Army. So the 1st Army is pared down pretty heavily, so they, because of this shifting of forces north to the 21st Army Group, it also requires the 1st Army to shift north as well. So what happens is on the 4th of February, the 16th Infantry is sent north to the 8th Infantry Division's area, which is working for the 3rd Corps. And they go to a little town called Gay, which is right near the Ruhr River. And I'll show you where that is on another map coming up. But they're going there, one, to prepare for the assault, because they're designated as the assault regiment to get across the Ruhr River, and then also to prepare to receive the rest of the 1st Division when it comes forward. Now, if you see on the map there where it says 2 February down the lower part of this slide, you'll see a big blue arrow heading northwest up through Monschau to Eupen and to an area just southwest of Aachen. Well, it's a little town called I don't have if I'm pronouncing this right, but it's a Belgian town called Avil, and that's where the division is assembled initially for the next phase of operation. And there they start receiving replacements and guys that have been wounded before from the 1st Division, and they're coming back, as replacements in the division and so forth. And they're only supposed to be there a short period of time because this operation on the Ruhr River is supposed to happen fairly soon. Well, it turns out it's going to be about a 3-week break because on the 8th of February, the Germans flood the Ruhr River by opening up the dams and everything, and it floods the river. And I'll show you a picture here shortly of what that looks like, which is going to cause a delay in the actual crossing. And obviously things like melting snow and all that doesn't really help because that just adds to the amount of water going downstream or upstream as the case may be. At any rate, so needless to say, the 1st Infantry Division, as they always do, they're going to take that 3-week break and they're going to use it to the best advantage. So let's talk a little bit about the lessons learned for the First Division in the Hürtgen Forest and the Battle of the Bulge, because your folks may know that the division was pulled out of the line after the Hürtgen Forest, which was a period of rest and relaxation that lasted, I think, all the 2 or 3 days before they push them back into the line in the Bulge. Well, now they're going to have about a 3-week period. So, as I've covered in previous episodes, I talk about how the First Division, you see and read about in a lot of personal anecdote type history of the First Division, how newbies that are brought into the unit are really kind of kept at arm's length by a lot of the veterans, because they don't really want to get to know them, because the guys who take the most casualties are the green soldiers, the ones who don't really know what they're doing. They tend to get killed off in bigger numbers than anybody else. And nobody wants to get to know them because they don't want to feel bad about this guy who they made friends with has now been killed. Well, that wasn't allowed in the First Division. At least it was supposed to be allowed. I'm sure it happened. But by and large, the effort was integrate these guys, make them feel part of the team, train them, teach them, get them ready for what they're going to experience, talk to them, and so forth. So I think for the most part, the First Division does that pretty well. One of the other things that Cliff Andrus, and I don't think he invented this, but he certainly adapted it if he didn't, was the concentration of artillery, using something called time and target, TOP, time and target concentrations, where you mass all your guns on a specific point to achieve a breakthrough or some sort of other effect. And so the First Division artillery, which they used a number of times in Hürtgen Forest, is continuing to train on that and preparing to use that where needed in future division operations. Also, the First Division has really put a lot of emphasis, particularly in the Hürtgen, on conducting night operations. So they try to, as much as possible, make their advances at night, so you have the cover of darkness to be able to provide you some concealment for movement and so forth, and then attack pre-dawn or right at dawn, which again is pretty much accepted, way of doing things anymore. It has been since then, if not before. But anyway, they train a lot on that sort of thing in the First Division. They also try to do envelopment operations, which the Russians got very good at, and in fact the Germans are very good at. Well, we're kind of turning the tables on them and doing the same thing for them, trying to make a penetration somewhere, get in behind them, forcing them to either retreat or surrender. In the Hürtgen, of course, it was a lot of forest fighting. Now, for this next phase of operation, that isn't going to help them a whole lot, but it will when they get up to the Harz Mountain, which will be the next episode. But this terrain is significantly different than what they've run into before. They've experienced this before, but it's been in France in World War I. World War II, they just drove through those areas. This time, they've got to fight through those areas. And what it looks like is huge farm fields, plowed fields, small villages that are strong-pointed for defense. And like I said, it looked very much like it did in World War I. And they're going to have to fight through that type of thing again. So things like moving at night is going to become very important, because you've got to move across these wide open areas with no concealment, or no cover, I should say, and very little concealment. So that's kind of what the things that they're focusing on and preparing for this next mission.
And do you think, Steve, that the junior commanders would have realized that after the Ardennes offensive, the Germans are really going to be properly on the defensive? Because although they have been defending since Normandy, it's been the German method of the Allies push forward a bit, the Germans counterattack, the Allies then clobber the counterattack with artillery and tank destroyers, that kind of thing. And there's been a sort of not a formulaic, but there has been a sort of system and a predictability about the Germans. But now they are going to be properly on the defensive because they just have lost their mobility. Is that a fair assessment?
I don't know that I can answer whether those junior leaders understood that yet or not. It's going to become very apparent.
They're going to find out quickly. Yeah.
I mean, they because it's. I'm not going to say it's rare, but it's far more uncommon for the Germans to conduct counterattacks at this point, because they just don't have the resources. It's in many cases it's all they can do to defend the strong points that they've designated. Of course, they're still very good at what they've always are, and that is interlocking fires and all that sort of thing. But even that tends to be a bit of a problem, because a lot of these villages in this part of Germany are, 2,500 yards, couple of kilometers apart. Well, your maximum effective range for a rifle is, whatever it is, 1,000 yards, 800 yards. You're not going to, at least with small arm fire, it's a lot more difficult to try to provide that type of defense. Okay, so on the 10th and 11th of February, the 16th Infantry's already been there. Let me go ahead and go to that slide. The next slide. This is the area that they're moving to. Let me just do a quick rundown on the slide here so that you kind of see what's going on. If you look at the roughly lower third, almost half of the screen, that's where the 1st Division sector is going to be in south of there. And then north of that is the 8th Infantry Division. You can see the 8th Infantry Division patch up there. You got the, 7th Corps is on the north side of that line. 3rd Corps, which the division is going to be working for initially, is on the south side of that line. The regimental headquarters, as you can see, is in the town of Gay. I mentioned that town earlier. It's on the lower left-hand part of the slide there. And you can see where the 3 battalions of the 16th Infantry moved into. The 1st Battalion is down in the southern end in a little town called Winden. You'll see where its headquarters is. The 3rd Battalion is kind of outside and southwest of the town of Lindersdorf. There, you see that flag there. That's where the 3rd Battalion headquarters is. And then the 2nd Battalion is in an assembly area to the rear near Gay, just north of Gay in the woods out there. So that's where the 16th Infantry deploys to. When the rest of the division comes up, the 26th Infantry will deploy to the south of that. And then the 18th goes into a reserve position. And there's reasons for that I'll explain in a little bit. Okay, so 10th and 11th, the 1st Division moves in from Belgium. They get into position here along the Ruhr River. And on the 2 days later, the 13th, the 1st Infantry Division is relieved from the 18th Airborne Corps and attached to General Milliken's 3rd Corps for this next phase of the operation. Of course, because the river's so flooded, it's again, they're not going to be able to get across anytime soon. So they continue to train, continue to integrate replacements and so forth, getting prepared for the next phase, which includes things like getting in and out of assault boats and stuff like that, because they're supposed to use assault boats, assault rafts that I'll show you some pictures of here in a minute to get across the river. So it's almost like, okay, we're doing D-Day all over again, only a lot smaller body of water and not without ramps. So anyway, so that continues to go on, all the training and so forth. For the amphibious operation, the engineers are supposed to provide a total of 92 assault boats. They're going to provide 10 what are called ducks, which is an amphibious deuce and a half, 2.5 ton truck. And I'll show you some pictures of these here in a bit. They're also going to construct 3 bridges. They're going to construct 2 foot bridges, or assault bridges they call them, for foot soldiers, and then a small vehicle assault bridge. And if you look on the map there, you'll see in the town of Winden, just across from Kreuzau in the south there, it says small vehicle bridge. That's where the small vehicle bridges are going to go in at. There's one of the foot bridges that's going to go up there in the vicinity of Niederau, between Niederau and Lindersdorf, and the other one is somewhere in the Kreuzau area. I don't know where that is. I've not ever been able to pinpoint it, but that's down in that area as well. So those bridges will be used and actually constructed once the regiment gets across, the assault units get across. They put those in very rapidly, and then the rest of the regiment comes across, followed by the 26th and finally the 18th. However, and of course from there they head off to the Rhine River, and I'll explain what that's going to look like here in a moment. On the 23rd of February, all that plan changes. And the reason why it changes is because if you look up north in the town of Düren, it's that larger town to the north, where you'll see where it says Bailey Bridge. The 8th Infantry Division was able to get a Bailey Bridge in up there. And so there's a decision made that we're not going to try to do an assault. We're going to continue to make noises and practice out there where the Germans can see us and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of part of the deception. But we're not actually going to cross an assault boat. We're going to get everybody across that Bailey Bridge rapidly and then attack down the east bank of the Ruhr River, which hopefully the Germans won't be expecting, and it'll take them by surprise. So that's kind of the plan. Of course, the second battalion goes first. The third battalion will go next, and then finally, like I say, the first battalion, once the bridges go in the south there, they'll cross the bridge, and that gets the 16th across, and then you bring everybody else across. And then once across, the 26th will take the northern sector, 16th in the center, and the 18th in the south, and the division will advance on the line toward the Rhine. So that's kind of the plan. Okay, let me show you some images here real quick, so it gives you a better visual picture of some of the things I talked about. And the first one of these is the town. Well, you can see right there in front, the town of Winden. Okay, and you see Kreuzau across the river. If you look where it says Roer flooded, look very closely at that. You'll see how flooded that is. That's at flood stage. And the river is at least 4 times, maybe 5 times wider at this point than what they're going to actually experience on the day they go across. Where this picture is taken, by the way, is from something that was described as a tower. I don't know. I've not been able to determine what this tower was, but it was used as an observation post. And in fact, there's an account of it in this book right here called "The Doctor's War," written by a guy named Charles Techmeyer. He was the regimental surgeon. Fascinating book. I'd recommend it to your readers. He talks more about the war itself and all the the personnel of the regiment headquarters and people in the regiment and so forth, as much as he does about doctoring, and because like I say, he was a regimental surgeon, but he talks a lot about the war itself. It's kind of fascinating book. But he talks about this position. In fact, he and the regimental commander Gibb go up into it one day, and while they're up there, they start receiving fire from a German position across the river, because they probably saw them looking through the binoculars and glinting off the glass or whatever. So they had to get out of the tower pretty quickly. But anyway, the other thing I wanted to point out to you is if you look in the distance, you'll see what's kind of a ridge line, a low-lying ridge line to the east of Kreuzau. Well, you'll see that again on a map here shortly. But once you get up over that ridge line, you're off in that flat farmland that I talked about, and you'll see more of that here shortly. Okay, so there are the ducks. Those are the amphibious deuce and a halves I talked about. They were going to use those for getting things across, like ammunition, resupply, mortar team, whatever else. The assault boat that you see off to the right there, that's parked right next to the small vehicle bridge. The boat itself could be used either as an assault boat, or it actually could be used as a pontoon as well if necessary. The guy that you see standing there, by the way, is the 1st Battalion Commander's named Ed Driscoll, and I'm sure this picture was taken sometime later that first day, because that's the area where the 1st Battalion crosses, and somebody snapped this picture when he's standing there on the bridge. Okay, there's another view of the small vehicle bridge. Oh, by the way, that assault boat, if you remember in the movie Bridge Too Far, we have Robert Redford taking those guys across the river and they're paddling. That's pretty much, gives you a visual picture of what that was supposed to look like. But there's the small vehicle bridge there. And then the assault bridge, as you can see, that's also a pontoon bridge. Little bitty pontoons with a single track that, soldiers can get across. And you see the guy there standing on the near side of the river. He is spacing soldiers as they go across, because you don't want to have too many people on it, nor do you want them walking too close together. Because what that does is you don't want to walk in lockstep either. You got to make sure you're not walking the same way as the guy in front of you, because it tends to make the thing bounce and it can throw people off. So anyway, that, needless to say, makes for a more rapid movement across the river, which under certain circumstances, you don't want to waste any time doing that. Okay, so that's kind of gives you a visual picture of what the crossing areas look like. And then finally, this is the actual Bailey Bridge that was constructed by the Infantry Division up in Düren. And that's the bridge that actually everybody crosses. And as you can see, you can get a Sherman across that. I mean, that's to the our good friends in the British Army. They're the guy who invented these things, and we just stole the plans from them and built them ourselves as well. But they're great bridges. In fact, we were still using those things in Vietnam. I've heard we even use some Bailey bridges that we deconstructed and rebuilt over in Afghanistan that were still over there when the British had built them.
Canada still use them when there's flooding. There's still at least 3 in Normandy you can drive over to this day. So yeah, they keep on going.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, anyway, there's the bridge that they actually crossed on. So, all right, now you've heard the old saying, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners will recognize this old saying that no plan survives the first contact with the enemy.
Yeah.
Well, this is one of those situations where it essentially does. It doesn't go 100% perfect, but it goes pretty darn close. And I want to read a quote out of Fontenot's book for everybody's benefit that kind of described why this probably happened as well as it did. And here's what he says. Despite the high turnover and high casualties of the 2nd Battalion 16th Infantry, and for that matter, all of the units assigned and attached to the 1st Infantry Division, it had a hard core of experience that permitted the complexity required for organizing a crossing, assembling the force on the far side, and attacking and clearing towns. It is easy to characterize the 1st Infantry Division as battle-hardened or experienced, but it fails to consider the learning and teaching that has to happen to succeed. Casualties and routine turnover meant that these units, as entities, could not be described as veteran, let alone hardened. But the small veteran corps of the 2nd Battalion made sure that the attack began on time and proceeded as planned. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, when are we going to make this attack? Well, they start out in the morning darkness of the 25th of February, and as you can see over on the left-hand side of the map there, you'll see the 2nd Battalion moves out of their assembly area, gets on the road, and heads up toward Düren and crosses the Bailey Bridge up there. And you'll see where the 3rd Battalion is there near Lindersdorf. They hop on the road, head west, get on the same road, and they take that long, circuitous route all the way up to Düren as well, and they cross up there on that Bailey Bridge as well. They get on the far side. Well, initially, once the 2nd Battalion gets over there, they get organized and they start the attack. They don't wait for the 3rd Battalion to get across. They start the attack down the east bank of the Ruhr River, and the Germans are still expecting an assault. Well, they are getting assaulted not only from the right flank, and they don't expect it. And as a result, the German defenses start to rapidly come apart as the 2nd Battalion advances down toward Niederau. Once they've cleared Niederau, the 1st Battalion starts, the engineers start building those footbridges. They start getting guys across as well. And then as they get down to Kreuzau, same thing happens down there with the small vehicle bridge and so forth. And the battalion, the 2nd Battalion continues to advance south toward a little town called Grove to the south, while the 3rd Battalion gets up on the high ground there and sets up defensive positions to prepare for any counterattacks that might come from that direction. And of course, this whole thing is supported by artillery fire, smoke, mortar rounds, whatever, and it goes off exceedingly well. The 26th Infantry crosses that night. They get over and start moving east, kind of southeast, really, to get into the 1st Division's sector. And then the 18th Infantry crosses where the 1st Battalion crossed, and they start moving kind of southeast too to get into the southern sector of the division sector, and they start moving east. So, like I say, this is almost a textbook perfect operation, and it goes exceedingly well. Again, to the credit of the guys who planned it and executed it. Okay, let me go to the next slide. You can see off where the 1st Division patch is on the left there, center left. There's the town of Kreuzau there. Well, the first town to be liberated after they get up on the high ground is the little town of Solar. By the way, all those little explosions that you see on the map are areas where elements of the 1st Division had fairly significant fights. And I'm not going to cover all of those. I'm actually going to give you one example of the fight that you see there. It's called the Vettweiß. It's the second one from the left. And I'll talk about that fight, which will kind of give the flavor of what most of these battles were like. Once, like I say, once they get across the low hills there, they get out onto that flat open terrain I talked about. Very little covering concealment, very little in the way of woods. As you can see, it's pretty wide open. And so they're going to, like I said, they're going to make their attacks at night. And the way the battalions are going to function, and this is also nothing new, but it's even probably more consistent in this particular operation, is the battalions, as they move on line, they move a company forward, and that company runs into the next village that's defended. They reduce that village, and then they leapfrog another company forward, bring the second company pass through the company that just took the town, and they become the next in line after the next fight takes place. So it's kind of a leapfrogging effort all the way from the Ruhr toward the Rhine River. Okay, so that's how the division's going to fight across this piece of terrain until they get to the Rhine. What I want to do now is I want to give everybody a view, a better understanding of what the terrain actually looks like. Now, you saw those hills in that first picture I had of Kreuzau and what it looked like behind there. Well, this next picture is from near the town of Solar, probably just south of there. The smoke you see off in the background, I think, is the smoke that's going into the area of Vettweiß for the attack. But you look at that terrain, you can see the woods, if you want to call it that, very sparse. It looks a little thicker in the woods there between the smoke and where we are looking at it. But even that's not really heavily wooded. And these areas, well, I should say a lot of areas. You've been to Germany. Many of you probably have been. If you go into the woods in Germany, so many of them, it's like a big garden. I mean, there are hardly any deadfall laying around. They're clean. I mean, the Germans keep them pristine. Now, that's not true in all of them, but so many of them. And even when you get into some of these more heavily forested areas, and you'll see some of that that I talked about in the next episode where I talk about the Harz Mountains, where, yeah, there's a lot of big trees there, but you can see, 100 yards, 150 yards down through those trees. That's not the case in most cases here. They're going to be kind of sparse, wooded areas like this, not as quite as neatly kept as a lot of German forests are. Anyway, wide open. Let me go back one slide here real quick, if I may. Oops, went ahead the wrong way. The next picture after that, if you go to almost dead center of the slide, you'll see a little town called Vettweiß, where it says 6 March, go down 2 explosions. That's Vettweiß. The second image is taken toward that town. And let me show you that. That's toward Vettweiß. That's toward Vettweiß. Okay, and again, you can just see how wide open it is. The only woods you see in this picture are on the high ground you see out there. And, if you saw it, paid attention to the map, now let me go back to it again. Once again, you'll see that Vettweiß is kind of in a wooded area. Yeah. Well, that's that wooded area you see off in the distance. There's a little bit of a ridge out there. Vettweiß is probably somewhat close to that highest piece on the right, and probably pretty close to that first German POW that's walking forward with his hands up. Somewhere in that area where Vettweiß is. And again, you just see how wide open it is and why it's kind of important to attack at night most of the time.
It just to interrupt your flow a little bit, when we had Anthony Tucker-Jones on Thursday, he was basically suggesting that the Germans spent too long defending the west banks of the Rhine and should have kind of pulled back earlier and concentrated their forces on the east bank. And when you see open ground like that in that photo there, it definitely gives weight to what he's saying, because if the Germans had pulled, I know that you're not saying that the fighting for these areas was easy, but if the Germans had pulled back the Rhine, areas like that under German artillery, under direct fire would have been hellish. I mean, they were hellish perhaps anyway, but do you agree the Germans spent too much time faffing about on the West Bank?
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. One, they're getting weaker and weaker. They're armored for. I mean, this is armor country. This is where you use tanks, right? And they're getting, they have fewer and fewer tanks to be able to counter the massive amount of American armor. But why did they defend between the Ruhr and the Rhine? It probably isn't because there was a lot of generals who said, no, we really need to defend here. It was probably the OKW saying, no, we can't let you, back up because.
Yeah, I mean, this is what we discussed. There's a certain amount of because that's kind of the heartland of Germany. It's where a lot of the voter base is. It's kind of there's hubris involved. Hitler doesn't want to let that part of what he thinks proper Germany go. So, there's lots of reasons why he's focusing. But we're derailing your otherwise fantastic presentation with my questions. But yeah, it's just thoughts that come to my head. That's all.
Because Paul, I mentioned to you what I did. After I retired from the Army, I worked on the staff right team.
Yeah.
And that type of thing right there is exactly the type of things that we would discuss with these future leaders in the Army. Is okay, guys. You see the ground. You know what the German plans are. You know what the American plans are. What do you think of this? How would you do this? And you get them to think about all those types of things to work through it, so that if they run into those types of situations in their own Army careers, perhaps they can develop a better solution to it than maybe what they've seen other generals do in the past and so forth. I mean, that's the essence of why we do history in the U.S. Army. It's not because we want to teach them, what happened on, the 5th of May, 1945. It's because we want you to learn things that you can use that'll help defeat our enemies.
Yeah.
And so forth. So anyway, enough pontificating there. All right. So I said I want to talk about one battle or one fight. And this is the attack on Vettweiß, Germany, and the attack on Vettweiß is kind of important. I mean, again, you're just analyzing the terrain. We could have this long discussion about why is Vettweiß even important? Why don't you bypass it and so forth? Well, someone looking at this would probably say something. At least I'd say something like, "Well, look at the town. It's a road hub. You've got roads coming in all from all types of directions. And if you were planning an advance east, and you are going to have to resupply your force on a wide front, which is the division you're going to have to do. You want to be able to have access north and south to be able to get food, ammunition, beans and bullets to the guys on the flanks and so forth. Well, what a perfect place to set up an MSR, a main supply route, through Vettweiß. That way, you got one to the north to the 18th Infantry, one to the east to the 16th Infantry, one to the south to the 18th, and 26th to the north. And there you are. I mean, that's why this is an important town to take. So it's not like you're going to try to bypass it. You got to take it because you don't want the Germans to have control of it after you pass through. So they're going to take the town. Now, it's so important that, well, to give you an example, the town of Sola that you see there on the left, that was taken at 2:20 in the morning on the 26th of February. Okay, the second battalion, third battalion takes the town that night. Okay, night attack. They take the town. Well, we want Vettweiß because it's a road hub. We're going to have to attack that thing during daylight hours. Okay, this is one of those necessity things. So how are we going to do this? Well, first of all, we're going to say, I Company, Captain Wolf, Carl Wolf, you're the guy in charge. You're going to attack that town, and you're going to take it. And in order to make it easier for you and faster, we're going to give you a platoon of M10 tank destroyers. We're going to give you a platoon of M4 Shermans, and we're going to give you a platoon of M3 Stuart tanks. And your guys are going to pile up on those tanks, and you're going to drive across as rapidly as possible to get to Vettweiß and take the town. I mean, that's the basic plan. First, you'll have your artillery fire going on, suppress the enemy, yada, yada, yada. But that's how you're going to get there, and we're going to make it quick so you're not walking all the way across there getting shot down from the German defender. All right, so that's the basic plan. Now, the one platoon will be, like I say, the platoon in the north is going to be riding the M10 tank destroyers. The platoon in the middle is going to be riding the M4 Shermans, and that's where Captain Wolf is going to ride. He's going to ride in the lead tank of the Shermans, and then the other platoons are going to ride in the M3 Stuarts. The Stuarts, part of the Stuarts mission is they drive past that woods there, they're supposed to spray that area with machine gun fire and 37 millimeter anti-tank gunfire, or 37 millimeter gunfire, I should say, to kind of keep the Germans' head down if there's anybody in there. And then you advance to the town, dismount, and clear the town. That's kind of how it's going to work. K Company and L Company are going to be held in reserve. One of the two will go forward to help if Wolf needs the help. And of course, the 7th Field Artillery Battalion, which is the direct support field artillery battalion for the 16th Infantry, is going to provide the indirect fire support along with some smoke support from an 81 millimeter mortar unit. Okay, or maybe it's a 4 deuce. I can't remember. I think it was 4 deuce mortar unit. Anyway, so they start about noon. They start the preparatory fires, and shortly thereafter, all 3 platoons move out. And they don't get more than, by the way, the movement is 2.5 kilometers, about 2,500 meters. So it's a fairly good distance, over a mile. And they don't get very far before all 3 platoons start really bogging down in the mud. In fact, when the M10 tank destroyers get into those plowed fields up there, all four tank destroyers get totally bogged down. They stop moving. Okay, so the platoon leader, the infantry platoon leader, hops off, gets his men off, says, "Okay, man, we got to go forward, dismounted." And he tells the tank destroyer platoon leader, "Okay, give us covering fire as we move toward Vettweiß." So they start to move out. Well, they aren't moved out very long before one of the M10s get hit by German anti-tank fire. So what happens to the tank destroyer platoon? The platoon leader gets all his men, gets them off their tank destroyers, and they beat him out to the rear. They retreat to the rear, provide no covering fire for the 3rd platoon that's going to now charge into Vettweiß with no covering fire. The M3 Stuarts, even though they're lighter tanks, much lighter than any of the other two, get very slow moving. They do a pretty good job of keeping everybody down. I don't think there was really any resistance in those woods, but they fired up, but they get kind of bogged down as they get closer to the Vettweiß as well. As the middle platoon, second platoon gets with Wolf gets close to Vettweiß, his lead tank gets hit by an anti-tanker, and he is thrown off the tank into the mud. A number of his soldiers are thrown off as well. Fortunately, other than flash burns from the round exploding, no serious damage or no serious injuries to the guys on that particular tank, except for the guys in the tank. 2 of the men in the tank were killed, and the other 2 were burned before they could get them out of the burning vehicle. Wolf doesn't waste any time. He gets up, dusts himself off, and he starts yelling at his men, "Let's go forward, man! Come on, let's go!" And he starts heading for the town. He gets to the town and he turns around, and the only people with him are his company executive officer, the 2nd platoon leader, and machine gun team. That's all that's there. Everybody else is still out there trying to make their way forward. Under fire, little by little, by fire maneuver, guys start making it into town. A number of guys were hit and wounded or killed in some cases. But eventually the company gets into the town. Wolf gets them organized, and he starts clearing the town. Well, soon after they start clearing the town, 2 of the Shermans are actually able to get into town and help clear the town. Well, they go, from basically, south to north. And as you see the little circles there, as they get to the key road intersections, they set up a defensive position there to hold those key road hubs there, while the rest of the unit clears individual houses, strong points, and whatever. But eventually, by that afternoon, they actually get the town cleared, and they're ready the 2nd battalion and the 3rd battalion is ready to start moving forward once again. So that's a typical attack that you see happen time and again through this next phase of operation. Okay, what I want to do at this point is to show you some images that were taken at Vettweiß and around Vettweiß. The first picture that you see there is I Company. They're all lined up in Solar. They're in the town of Solar at this point, and they're lined up. You see the M10 tank destroyers there. You see the Shermans behind them, and then behind the Shermans back in the distance will be the M3 Stuarts, and they're waiting to mount up and ready to go on the attack once the artillery fire gets rolling. There's to the right there is a 4-deuce mortar platoon, which as I say, I think I'm pretty sure they're firing smoke rounds. One of the interesting things about this picture, I always like really analyzing all these pictures, because if you look at that guy who's about to drop the round, you look real close. Look at that guy's belt buckle. I swear to God, that's one of those German God Memphis.
Oh yeah, yeah, looks like
buckles. Because that's not a GI issue belt buckle, I can guarantee you. But I'll bet you that's what that is. Anyway, just kind of a little interesting sidebar there. And then the two bottom pictures are in Vettweiß. They're basically taken of the same street. And I suspect this is after the town. In fact, I'm sure it's after the town's been captured, because if you notice, the soldiers are passing through and they got their weapons at sling arms, so they're not like they're clearing it or anything. So my guess is this is either the troops from either K Company or L Company as they're passing through to continue to attack east. But anyway, there you are. Okay, this was also in Vettweiß. The first picture that you see there, you'll see a slogan that's written on the wall. And I've got, interestingly enough, I've got a number of pictures that I've picked up over the years of things like this in not only the Ruhr campaign, or the Rhine campaign, but also up in the Harz Mountain, where these, slogans are written on buildings and walls and stuff. And of course, you see what the translation says there of that particular one. And I was wondering if that wall still existed. So I went on Google Earth to find it, and sure enough, there it is.
Yeah.
Picture, and it's up in the northern end of town, but the wall's still there and looking pretty much like it was without the slogan.
And it defines what we were saying earlier, Steve, about that unexpected quality about the Germans. You've got some who are literally seeing it as like they're doubling down. Hitler's fantastic. We're still gonna pull this out of the bag. Let's fight the last round. Let's get everything we've got. And then down the street, you've got Germans kind of surrendering and running away in certain places. It's that complete uncertainty about exactly what you're going to face in all of these little villages and towns, as you say, can be just 2,000 yards apart. And it does definitely make this campaign fascinating to study 80 years on. Not necessarily much fun to be in at the time, but the unpredictability is definitely there.
It's funny you mentioned that because I keep thinking that this is the second time you've kind of addressed it, and I keep thinking of when we get to the Harz Mountains, I've got some vignettes there that talk about the very thing that you're talking about.
Yeah,
and it's fascinating. To have some of these people who they're going to die in the trenches, and then the next unit down is they can't wait to surrender. So so much of that has to do with leadership, indoctrination, any number of things.
I think we addressed it with the other shows. It's a campaign where, to some extent, the Germans it's junior commanders making decisions. There are certain campaigns where it is corps commanders, generals and stuff making it. Now, because of the kind of fractured nature of the German defense, it is a Hauptmann there, an Obersturmführer somewhere else. So I guess that's why you're getting a more variety of responses depending on that individual commander's confidence and his position with his troops. Whereas earlier battles, it's people like Model in overall charge of the whole thing, whereas now it's more down to the individual commander to demonstrate his determination or lack of, I guess.
Yeah. One other thing I would mention, and I think this is good, this is something that you run into, I think, virtually in any conflict, on both sides, regardless of what their ideology is. But a lot of soldiers, when you're fighting in your own country, your motivations for a lot of soldiers, I'm going to say everybody, but for your motivation for why you're doing it is hearth and home. I'm not fighting for Hitler here. I'm fighting because my family is, the next state over, or whatever. And so your motivations for trying to protect things. And then, of course, you do have the ideological, defenders who are die for ideas as opposed to I'm fighting for my country or whatever. And I think you get that, that and other motivations actually for fighting. I mean, hell, look at Kelly's Heroes. They were fighting to take that town so they could rob the bank, right?
Yeah.
Hey, anyway, the last the other photo there I found fascinating. That's in Vettweiß, and you notice it's a bunch of civilians, and they've been rounded up and put in what it looks like a chicken coop or something. It's a chain link fence there. A couple of ladies that are sitting on boxes outside of it, but most of them are inside, and they were put in there to keep them out of the way of the military traffic that was coming through at this point, so they wouldn't get run over or cause any problems or whatever. But if you look at the faces on them, you look closely, what you see is almost everybody in that picture is smiling. And these, my guess, given the fact that you see suitcases and bags and whatever, these are people who are refugees, probably from Kreuzau or somewhere further west, and they have been caught up in the advance. And I think for many of these people, it's relief that okay, the Americans are past us. The war is over for us. We don't have to worry about being bombed because we're behind American lines now. And I think it's a relief for them because they've been putting up with this, disruption in their life for the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, and they're probably going to get fed as well. That was another aspect of this campaign is the Germans, in order to defend these last positions, they're pulling in every last bit available food and things like that. So the civilians, it's hard to be motivated when you're starving hungry. And I think some of the Germans are just so damn hungry. They would surrender to anybody who offers them even a D bar, a D ration bar is going to be better than nothing.
Again, one of those things that that'll come out in like the very last episode, the one about the concentration camps. You're exactly right. And think about again, militarily, think about the burden that is on an invading force. If you are abiding by the Geneva Convention, which some do, some don't. I can guarantee on the Russian side of the front, probably not too much concern about where the civilians.
Yeah. No, I mean, at this point, Eisenhower is definitely thinking about the number of people who are going to be freed under his overall command, the number of extra mouths he's going to have to feed. He's already thinking, about the immediate peace as well as the immediate combat ahead of him. He's already thinking, because he's basically a good dude. He's going to care about these people. His forces conquer. And as you say, I don't think the Soviets, Stalin certainly doesn't have the same sympathy. Look at bloody Warsaw and all that. So no, it's intriguing.
Yeah. Anyway, I found that such a fascinating photo. I wanted to share that with your listeners. Okay. So now, as I mentioned, this is kind of the way that the campaign pans out. Just a couple of points here, because there are some changes in the advance that I need to address because it has an impact on how the First Division goes into Bonn. First off, if you look you'll see where it says up toward the top, it says 28th February. You'll see that's the line of advance up to the 28th of February. And just to the right of that, you'll see an explosion that says Pingsheim. Well, the 18th Infantry, and I don't remember which battalion it was, runs into a pretty stiff fight there. And interestingly enough, somehow or another, and I've never been able to determine how this happens, and maybe, I don't know, but the 18th Infantry gets out in front of the 16th Infantry. Remember I said the 18th is advancing on the south side. But look how far up north they are. They're almost center sector at this point, and they're out in front of the 16th Infantry when they get to Pingsheim. Well, they run into a stiff fight there, and at the end of that fight, they are pulled back and put into a temporary assembly area. And the 16th is going to move forward, and they're going to end up taking over not only the center sector, but also the southern sector of the 1st Division front. And them and the 26th Infantry will continue the advance to the east. And you can see where they are on the 3rd of March, the next limit of advance on that date. And as I mentioned, Vettweiß, Vettweiß that you see there. And then finally on the 6th of March, where the division is they're about to move to the vicinity of Bonn. Now they don't get the mission until the following day. They actually are told on the 7th, and I'll explain that here in a moment. One other thing about this slide here is that you see there at the bottom. This is the same slide I showed you before, but I added that because what it shows is the elements of 6 different divisions that the 1st Infantry Division was fighting during this movement between the Roer, and the 6th of March. And in fact, those are just division size elements. There's any number of other, anti-aircraft units and engineering. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other stuff. They capture all kinds of guys from a whole range of different organizations, and some of those are because the units are just dissolving. Some people are deserting, and others they're thrown into line ad hoc as they grab people up that's trying to retreat back. They say, okay, you're fighting with us now, almost kind of like what the Soviets did in Stalingrad. They just grab people and say, you fight with us now. So there's a lot of that ad hocery going on at this point. By the way, I didn't coin that word, even though it's not a real English word. It's been in use for a long time. Okay, so as I say, on the 7th of March, the 7th. I'm sorry, where am I going at? The 9th Armored Division. I think it was whatever. I can't remember the armored battalion. Armored Infantry Battalion captures the Remagen Bridge, and that's only about 13 kilometers south of Bonn. It's very close to Bonn, and they captured it on the 7th of March. On that date, the 3rd Corps contacts General Andrus and says, "Hey, you guys are going to take Bonn, and we want you to take Bonn and the Rhine River Bridge there." It was originally in the sector of the 9th Infantry Division to the south, but because the 9th Infantry is now going to shift south and be prepared to cross the Remagen Bridge, 1st Infantry Division gets the mission to go into Bonn. And so the boundary shifts. Well, when that happens, the 18th Infantry, as you can see, gets orders to move from Pingsheim down south. They cross into the 9th Infantry Division's sector, and then crosses the northern area of it to get back into the 1st Division sector to take the southern half of the city of Bonn. They're going to have the southern half. 16th Infantry, of course, is going to get the mission to take the northern half. Now, there's a couple of things I want to bring up at this point that are one's just kind of setting the stage for what happens in the Harz Mountains later on, but it's an important thing for us. I say us, the U.S. Army historically, but just to kind of set the stage. At this point in time, the U.S. Army had something called what we have come to call the 90 division gamble, and we weren't going to have any more than 90 divisions, and we were going to, do individual replacements and yada yada yada. We don't pull units typically out of the line and rebuild them and put them back in the line. We just start throwing replacements into them, and for the most part, keep them in the line. Well, we have a lot of casualties going on, and as a result of that, we're having a difficult time. The U.S. Army's having a difficult time replenishing soldiers into particularly infantry line units. So the call goes out to African American units. Of course, the U.S. Army is segregated at this time, and there's all kinds of African American units that are specialty units, things like anti-aircraft artillery battalions, engineer battalions, quartermaster companies, and those types of things. And the call goes out saying, hey guys, we need to have people who will volunteer to fight in infantry divisions. Well, they get a whole lot of volunteers. And on the 7th of March, 3 African-American infantry platoons show up in the 1st Division area. And each one of these one platoon each is going to be assigned to each of the 3 regiments. And on the 11th of February, is when each of these platoons actually get to the companies that they're going. They go through kind of an indoctrination period with their regiments, and then they put them into their specific regiments. In the case of the 16th Infantry, they're going to become the 3rd platoon of B Company. And I mention that because that platoon is going to have a role to play up in the Harz Mountains that I'll talk about later. But also, it's this effort to bring these black soldiers into white units that is going to help President Truman in 1948 to start the desegregation of the U.S. Army. Their performance in combat in the waning days of World War II. I mean, it's not the only thing, but it's a big part of the decision-making process. So I just happen to mention that at this point. The other event that happens is kind of humorous but serious at the same time, and it deals with something that happens that we all know happens. hopefully more often, way more often than not, and that is friendly fire incidents. Once the division gets the word that they're going to have to take Bonn, Colonel Gibb sends out word to his battalion commanders and regimental colonels, hey, I want you to come to Regimental CP. I got to brief you on the new plan for taking the town of Bonn. So come and see me. So later on that afternoon, a guy named Lieutenant Colonel, let me go to that slide real quick. The guy on the right there, Lieutenant Colonel Henry L. Davidson. He's the commander of the 635th or 634th Tank Destroyer Battalion. By the way, this segment's going to, I'm going to have to use some foul language. So if any of you out there are averse to that, just plug your ears now. But otherwise, just bear with me because there's a couple actual quotes I want to go over that actual incident. So full warning. So Davidson comes into the CP. And Gibbs over there with his map, talking with people about the upcoming operation. And Davidson comes walking in, and Gibbs glances over at him, and Davidson's got this kind of hangdog look. He's looking depressed. He's not, he's kind of down the mouth. And Gibbs goes, Colonel Davidson, what's the problem? He goes, hell, we've had some pretty tough luck today. Jerry's shot up 2 of my tank destroyers. And Gibbs goes, well, was anybody hurt? He goes, no. He says, the good thing is we'd stopped, and that platoon had everybody dismounted, and when the 2 vehicles were hit, there was no, there was nobody hurt. And he goes, well, that's good. I'm glad you hit it. Well, come on over to the map here. I need to brief you up on something. So he brings them over to the map. And about that time, Lieutenant Colonel Wallace J. Nichols, the guy on the left, commander of the 745th Tank Battalion, I'm sorry, I've got that. I screwed this up. Davidson comes in, and he's all jubilant. He says, "Hey, we shot up a couple of German tanks today. We're some great shooting and so forth." So Gibbs says, "Okay, that's great." It's Nichols who comes walking, and he's all down the mouth, looking bad. And Gibbs notices him and says, "What's up?" He goes, we had some tough luck that Jerry shot up a couple of our tanks. Nobody killed, nobody wounded, and so forth. He goes, well, that's pretty good. And then Gibb walks back over to the map. He says, hey, Colonel Davidson, come over here to the map and show me where you shot up those 2 Jerry tanks. You know where this is going. So he goes, well, hey, we got them right here. Well, Nichols had walked over to the map and looked, and he goes, why, you goddamn son of a bitch, those are my tanks. And Davidson goes, well, how the hell was I supposed to know your tanks? It's the first time your tanks had ever been out in front of us during the whole goddamn war. Well, about that time, these guys start going at it, and Big Gibbs has to break them up and keep them from fighting. And he grabs them both and he says, look, you guys, I don't want you to breathe a word to anybody about this, especially your soldiers, because you guys need to be fighting the Germans, not each other. So, a real incident, but fortunately, nobody got killed. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been so funny. At any rate, so I just want to share that because I thought that was a pretty humorous story that happens in the regiment of CP. Okay, so what was the plan? Well, they issued the actual operations order about 9 o'clock that evening. And of course, the objective, as you can see, is the bridge. And you'll see it over there on the right-hand side of the slide there. That's what they're going for. That's the objective of taking Bonn. The plan was for the 1st Battalion. Well, first of all, if you look at the map, you'll see a dialogue box right there in the middle. It says position for the regiment, evening 7 March. And you'll see the regimental headquarters is in the town of Bornheim. That's where the incident with the 2 tank commanders took place. And in the town of Roystorf, just to the east of that, is where, and by the way, the 2nd Battalion is kind of there in Bornheim as well. 3rd Battalion is in the town of Roystorf, just to the east of it. And then the 1st Battalion is in the town of Alfter, which is just the south of the 2nd Battalion, or the 3rd Battalion. Okay, so the plan is for the 3rd Battalion to head northeast to the Cologne Road, take a right, and then head into Bonn and come into Bonn from the north. The 1st Battalion would come in through Dransdorf, the next town to the east, and come in on a street called the Friedrichstrasse, and they would move to the bridge and would have the responsibility of securing the bridge. And then prepare, once they get there, they, of course, prepare to cross the bridge. And then the second battalion, they move up and go into Dransdorf after the first battalion clears it, and they would set up defensive positions there. And I'll show you where all those are going to be here in just a moment. To the south, of course, you have the 18th Infantry that's going to take the southern part of Bonn. You can see that arrow where they go. Yep. And then to the north, you have the 26th Infantry, which is supposed to move up to the Rhine River and set up blocking positions for the north to prevent anybody coming in from the north. Block from that direction, 18th Infantry and the 9th Division to the south. So you have a secure operations to take care of Bonn and grab the bridge. The interesting thing about this attack is that it would be a night attack. No surprise there, perhaps. No artillery preparation either. And the real surprise is that the two battalions were going to move into Bonn in column. They weren't going to be deployed as you would normally see in a combat formation. They were just going to march down the roads and march straight into town and deploy as needed if needed. And so, I mean, that's pretty much the basic plan. Everything is going to be, they're going to wing it from there. By the way, the defenders, as you can see, is something called the 253rd Replacement Battalion. Now, Replacement Battalion, of course, is typically a unit that trains replacements to go out and farm them out to other units to flesh them out. But now they've taken the guys that have come in, they've done whatever training they have, if any, and they're the guys who are predominantly responsible for holding the town center. Now, I say town center because unbeknownst to the 16th Infantry is there's actually a ring of defenses around Bonn. And just keep that in mind as we go through the operation. Okay, so 0400, the attack kicks off. They start off in column, heading down the respective roads. And as they're marching along, periodically there would be flares that would go up. And these were German flares. And oddly enough, even though it was probably pretty likely that German observation posts would have noticed these columns, nobody was ever fired on. And the conjecture is that they thought these were retreating German columns. From a distance at night with the flare, how can you tell enemy from unless you were right up on them? And there were a number of OPs that were right up on them, but interestingly enough, they all get swept up by the lead units. In fact, I Company, Karl Wolf, has a platoon that's out forward initially, and he sweeps up that platoon sweeps up an OP, an observation post or a guard post, and about 20 minutes later, they sweep up the replacements, the relief guys for that particular guard post. So the Germans they're not expecting this attack. Is the bottom line. And so the most bizarre incident, though, kind of preface this with, if you remember in the movie The Longest Day, you'll remember there's this scene where there's flares going up at night, and there's this stone wall in a French farm field somewhere, and there's a German patrol walking down one side of the wall, and an American patrol walking up the other side of the wall, and the flare goes off, and both sides look up in the air at the flare, but they don't notice friend or foe until the very last guy in the column turns around and sees a guy who happens to be a German, and he goes to shoot at him, but the flare goes out and they go off in the darkness. Well, very similar incident happens here. K Company, who's leading the 3rd Battalion at this point, has a lead platoon forward, and it's being escorted by an M4 E8 Sherman tank. Now, the EZ8 nickname has a muzzle brake on it, which most of the earlier, my knowledge, no, the earlier versions of the Shermans had a muzzle brake. It was a straight barrel. So it was, again, conjecture, but any Germans who happened to spot this tank probably thought it was a German tank, given the muzzle brake muzzle brake. Anyway, it's up front with this K Company lead platoon. It's marching on the left-hand side of the road, heading southeast there, and up ahead is another column. It turns out it's a German column, and they're on the right-hand side of the road. And that platoon gets up to where it's right at the back of that German column before the platoon leader that's up front realizes those are Germans. And one of the soldiers, actually a couple of them, realize, hey, those are Germans. And he goes, no, don't do anything, because he spotted the column veering off to the right, going down another road. They were going to be going straight. Just let them go, which they did. Well, he gets down the road just slightly, and one of the Germans in the rear of the column turns around and yells back something like, was Panzer Division is das? What Panzer Division is that? And as his column was marching off in the dark, they were marching off in the dark in another direction. He says, ignore them, and they just kept on marching, and so nothing happens. So anyway, they get down into Bonn, and they are in the town center by about 5:30, an hour and a half march. They're in the town center. Both battalions are actually they're making their way into town center, but they're starting to set up in the various assembly positions. It'll take them, some of the rest of the morning to get everybody into position. Interestingly enough, the C Company commander, a guy named Captain John Likas, sets up his command post up in a house there in town. And later in the day, he discovers that this house is the house where Beethoven was born in, which was kind of an interesting little tidbit as well. But still, no fighting. Well, as dawn starts to break, Driscoll, the 1st Battalion commander, has gotten close enough in that he can see the bridge, and he contacts the division headquarters. Says, "Hey, the bridge is still standing, and we're going to start, making plans to do what we need to do to take the bridge." Well, it's not very long after that, probably within the half hour or less, that all of a sudden a whole bunch of fighting starts breaking out all over town. The Germans in that outer defensive ring, they'd slipped through both battalions, or the majority of them anyway, had slipped through this defensive ring somehow, and they now discovered that the Americans are behind them, and they turn around and they start fighting their way back in. And these guys are supported with a few tanks. I don't know how many, probably not more than a couple, maybe a platoon's worth of tanks from the 1st SS Panzer Division. But how much of the rest of the divisions there? Not much. It's I think this is probably a detachment that got separated, whatever. But there's no evidence there's a whole lot of other SS guys there. Although there's some, there's not very many. On the 18th Infantry, however, as they come into the southern end of town, as they get to the outskirts there, they do run into the defensive ring, and they have a pretty tough fight getting all the way to the Rhine River that day. In fact, they don't get there, they don't reach the Rhine until about 1800 that evening. Okay, so the fighting pretty much lasts all day long. And I won't get into all the details of it, but just suffice it to say, it's typical, in the city fightings. A lot of casualties, not huge amounts for the Americans, but enough. Because of that fighting going on, the 1st Battalion is not able to mount an attack on the bridge. So General Anders decides, okay, just keep doing what you're doing. I'm going to send the 26th Infantry down, and we're going to have a battalion of theirs cross the bridge and take the bridge. So the 26th Infantry starts moving down, at least one battalion of them. But as they're moving down to take the bridge, about 9 o'clock that evening, 9:15, something like that, boom, the bridge goes up in a huge blinding flash. Well, the engineer captain who blows the bridge is actually captured. And he later on and talks about how, he hasn't had any sleep for 3 days because he was so worried about whether the charges were going to go off, and he wanted to make sure the bridge gets blown, because I'm sure he had been threatened with an inch of his life because of what happened to the Remagen bridge. But anyway, he successfully blows the bridge is down, and needless to say, the guys from the 26th Infantry were probably going, boy, good thing we didn't have to charge that bridge, because that would have probably been a pretty bloody fight. Okay, well, what's the upshot of the whole thing? Well, the bridge comes down. The town of Bonn, of course, is taken. By the way, the 1st Division, during the movement from the Ruhr to the Rhine, takes about a little over 5,000 POWs. Okay, so we're talking close to half a division of troops. not necessarily all combat troops, of course, but still troops are troops, and any one of those guys could have picked up a weapon and defended. 733 of those guys were captured in Bonn itself, and I don't know how much anybody else got gathered up from Bonn. Probably the most significant thing, at least in terms of POWs, is that the 60,000 prisoner of war captured by the 1st Infantry Division in World War II was captured in the city of Bonn. And I'll show you a picture of that right here shortly. I'll have a follow-on to that story in the Harz Mountains as well. Okay, so that's what happens in Bonn. And once again, I want to show you a few images here of that operation, specifically pictures, for the most part, pictures in Bonn itself. Oh, I'm sorry, I should have gone to this earlier. Here's how the regiment ended up. As you can see, A, B, and C Company, that's the 1st Battalion right there nearest to the bridge. C Company was where Captain Leichen's guy, somewhere in that bubble was where Beethoven was born. And then the 3rd Battalion, when they set up to the north there, they turn around and face toward the north, defend from that direction. 2nd Battalion's in the rear there at Gransdorf, and you can see where the 18th Infantry comes in to the south and gets to the Rhine River. All right, so these are images. Some of these are taken the next day, the morning after the bridge is blown. But you can see, particularly the first picture, well, all of them, there's still a heightened sense of security. You got people got their weapons out. They aren't, sling arms or anything like that. It looks like this is a column of guys that are preparing or getting ready to continue movement through the city somewhere. The guys on the right are pulling security at an intersection for whatever reason. Okay, here's another example of the go get 'em boys signs on the side of the building. Guy pulling security up on the top of that rubble there. I find the picture to the lower right is kind of interesting because there's an older gentleman there. This is on the 9th as well. All these pictures were taken on the 9th of March. An older gentleman walking with a cane, going on his morning or afternoon constitution, or whichever one it is. He doesn't seem to be too concerned about having American soldiers standing around, but and that's of course a TD from the 634th Infantry. Okay, there you are. Prisoners of war being rounded up. All of these happen to be pictures of 16th Infantry guys rounding up prisoners in Bonn. I don't know who, if anybody, or who took the 60,000 prisoner. Not that makes that much difference. But there he is, and you got a sign. I'm sure there's a picture somewhere with his face, although I've never run across it. But, to celebrate, there it says 1st Division welcomes its 60,000th prisoner of war. Quite an honor for that guy, I suppose. And finally, this, almost finally, that's the Bonn River Bridge before it was blown. Pretty sad that that thing got blown. I mean, that's a beautiful bridge. What a great piece of architecture that is. Unfortunate that it had to get blown, but war is hell, I guess. And this is what it looked like afterwards. This picture, at first I thought this was well after the bridge was blown. As I examined it much more closely, if you look at it really close, you start to see that no, this has happened. This is fairly soon after. I don't know how soon after the bridge was blown, but you can see in the front there, behind that pole that's sticking up in front of you, is part of the causeway that's in the water there. But if you look behind the rubble, you'll see that there's still much of the bridge. It's down below the water. It's not like the Remagen bridge where you see a lot of it above the water. Much of it is below the water here, so I suspect the channel's deeper at this particular location. But there's the end result of that German engineer captain. Did a fine job blowing that bridge. Okay, that pretty much sums it all up. What questions do you have?
You've kind of been addressing them as we've been going on, frankly. I mean, my big one really is, I mean, you're going to come back and do the next part of this as they push into Czechoslovakia. But in your assessment of the 1st Division during this period, what did they do well, and what were some of the things that maybe they still could have find some room for improvement?
Uh, I'm starting to feel like Kamala Harris here. Well, I can't think of anything. Uh, you know, having, needless to say, this is a part of the war where you don't get as much detail as you do
Yeah.
earlier in the war. I mean, there's so much more written about D-Day or, the Battle of the Bulge or Aachen or whatever. So you don't have quite the coverage. Even the personal anecdotal stuff. A lot of it is talking more about their buddies and what they did or didn't do and so forth. But I would say, and this is where I would agree with Greg Fontenot. And again, I'm biased. I love the First Division, but the First Division has the reputation that it does because of the job that it did. Otherwise, I mean, there are some of the U.S. divisions that had some problems, and that comes out in the history. You don't find that often. I mean, the First Division didn't do everything perfect, but at this point of the war, all of your leaders are very they're very experienced. In fact, that's one of the things it's always impressed me, and I think this is true for the whole First Division. But again, I'm more familiar with the 16th Infantry for obvious reasons than I am the other two regiments. But having known many of these guys over the years and talking to them and looking at the records and so forth, so many of these guys in the 16th Infantry, and like I said, I believe for the 18th and 26th as well, they were eligible to go home after Sicily. And so many of them stayed. They didn't have to stay. And so going into D-Day, and a lot of them had points after D-Day that they could have, maybe it was harder to do at that point. I don't know. I don't know the ins and outs of it. But you have so many people that were with the regiment at Fort Devens, Massachusetts, when it gets moved there to prepare for World War II, that are still with it in 1945. In fact, again, a surprising number stay with it when they go back to Bamberg, Germany, in early or mid 45, and are still with it at the beginning of 1946. They've extended or whatever, and it's just astounding. I think compared to many other regiments, and I'd say most other regiments, you had such a core of well-trained, well-experienced leaders.
Yeah.
And of course, the guys who survived, I was a private last week, and the corporal this week, and the sergeant next week. They move up, and those guys know what they're doing, and they try to pass those experiences on to the guys behind them, so they don't get killed needlessly. So I think that the First Division to me is hitting on all 6 cylinders or 8 cylinders because it was the VA. And
my take would be that
why is the First Division told to go way up north to the Harz? Why isn't some other division sent into the Harz? Because it's supposed to be the Alpine fortress, right?
Yeah.
This is supposed to be one of these brutal. Why are we sending the First Division to do it? Why wasn't it the 8th Infantry Division or somebody else like that? No, First Division went up to the Harz, and I think it's because the First Division, okay, we know we're not being fair here, but this is war. These guys can get the job done. Have I ever run across anybody say that? No, but I'll bet you. Patton said as much. I got to have those bastards with me when I go into Normandy.
Yeah,
that's how they end up backing, not because he has them, because he didn't get that job, but he's very influential in getting the First Division to England.
I mean, my point is a unit like the First Division at the end of the war is never going to give you a less than 7 out of 10, let's say. Whereas some of the new divisions, they might give you a 10 one day, but they might give you a 3 the next day because they're still learning the game. I mean, we did a show about the 70th Division, and they had benefited absolutely from the latest training, the latest methods. They had done urban warfare training. They'd done forest fighting in the USA. So they definitely have some real skills that they bring to the battlefield. But they also have a sort of a sense of just having to learn in the job. There's all very well learning in practice and then putting it, in training and then putting it into practice. Whereas the first, like some of the veteran British and Canadian units, they've been there and done it. So as you said, with the command constantly bringing its new people through. You're not going to try and reinvent the wheel in January 45. There's no point there because, right, we've been doing it this way for 3 years now. We're going to try and do it a completely different way for the last few weeks of the war. That would be stupid. So there is a certain, I'm not going to say predictability, but there's a steadiness about those veterans. You get the same with the American 3rd Infantry by the latter part of the war. That, you kind of know what they're going to do because it works. Yeah. You're not gonna throw the method out, and I think that's sometimes when you look at the units that have been there a long time, they're not quick to bring the new ideas through because they're really good at the old ideas. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's also it's logical, but it's also a reason why you have a regimental commander who's killed. You're going to bring somebody totally different out from the outside and bring him in. Probably not. It doesn't happen. Yeah. But the best thing to do is you take your senior battalion commander and you put him up because why? He knows the unit. They know how they function. He doesn't have a learning experience, and he's not going to come in and say, "Okay, guys, we're going to do it my way," which may or may not work. I mean, the 16th Infantry ran into that in North Africa. We ended up with a guy named Colonel Valerie Fichet, who was a buddy of Terry Allen. Terry Allen put him into the regiment after the previous regimental commander left. He had no combat experience. He had combat experience with World War I, and he still fought like a World War I guy. And he was not very well liked within the regiment, and he doesn't stay in the regiment very long, primarily because he's wounded, but everybody was happy to see him go. Who comes over? Another 1st Division guy, George Taylor, to take over the regiment. Yeah, so, there's a logic to that you want to try, and particularly in terms of leadership, promote your horses, the guys who are proven performers and that know the unit, know the troops, understand how they do business and all that kind of stuff. Because when you bring a totally different guy in, and that's, you see that happen at all levels. I mean, it's, the only place you can really can't avoid it, although you can to a degree, is at the platoon leader level. But even a lot of those platoon leaders are being brought up from the ranks of sergeants, getting a battlefield commission because they know what to do, and they can lead a platoon. So, yeah, I mean, that's why I say I think when you look at again, I'm looking at somewhat with blinders on. When I look at the 16th Infantry and what I know about them and the personnel. I know a lot of these guys. There's old guys, but talking to them and so forth, and listening what they had to say, and then reading about them in various accounts that are personal accounts, you come to realize that these guys were pretty tough. And I'll tell you that our association, when I first joined it back in the late '80s, there was a bunch of World War II guys, and you can tell these guys were tough. I mean, they I think all combat veterans were like that. I mean, it's not unusual for any unit, but you could see it. I mean, you felt it. I
wanted to just reference when you said earlier they had a 3-week break, and I've had this discussion whether people are saying, well, that's great, isn't it? I said, yeah, but in the ETO, in a unit like that, a 3-week break. So by the time so it's going to take you maybe 24 hours to be driven back off the line. Then you're going to queue up for a shower. That might take half a day. Then you go and collect all the mail. Then you go and hand in your old uniforms, get your uniforms. By the time then you probably maybe got to have your trench foot sorted. By the time you've done all that stuff, that's probably the first week gone, and then the last week of the 3 weeks is probably getting ready to go back to the front. So it's not like they were just on 3 weeks leave in Paris or something. That a 3-week break for a unit in the theater, a lot of that is just going to be catching up and all the bloody housekeeping stuff you've got to do in the army, isn't it? Finding where your footlocker is, getting that mail, that parcel that someone sent you 6 months ago that you got to track down. All those things like that. That's another reality of a unit like the 1st Division. It's not just the time in combat. It's the time when you're still in theater. You're still busy. You're still just doing stuff, aren't you?
No. Yeah, no, exactly. That's exactly right.
Well, we'll leave it there, Steve. We'll bring you back for the program about Czechoslovakia. Folks, nothing tomorrow, but we've got a fantastic show coming your way on Monday about the problem of zoos in World War II. So how zookeepers dealt with keeping animals alive in World War II. That's a fantastically new subject for World War II. Looking forward to that. So, folks, don't forget to click like and subscribe, buy my guest books, but I will see you all on Sunday. Cheers, everybody. Thanks for watching. Bye.